Ben Newton from Macro Connect here with a tutorial video showing you how to successfully teach the coding concepts covered in lesson number 2 in the Code to Compose student-facing curriculum. So at this point, you should have already gone through lesson number 1, ideally with yourself or with your students. So you and your students should be totally fluent and comfortable using the play and sleep commands in the Sonic Pi application. But other than that, that's all you need to know to continue with this. So lesson number 2 covers 3 new coding commands. One is called use_synth. Basically, that allows us to apply synthesizer sounds to individual notes or play commands, essentially up to this point, that we write in Sonic Pi. The next command is called pan, which basically allows us to select how much of the sound is coming out of which one of our headphones, either the left or the right, and we can blend and mix that, make things come out of just the left, just out of the right, etc. And the third command is amp, which is short for amplitude, and it allows us to adjust the volume of each and every one of the sounds, essentially, that we code in Sonic Pi. So we can make certain sounds louder, others quieter. It really helps with just adding extra dimension and dynamics to the compositions that we're making. So first off, let's talk about synth. So synth, again, short for synthesizer, allows us to change up the sound of our play commands. So up until this point, all of our plays had a very kind of boring beep sound for every single command that we've written, especially in lesson 1. So it sounds like this. So again, these beeps will sound a little bit different if you make them in a higher register or a lower register, as with any command in Sonic Pi. However, if you're just using this beep sound, it can get boring pretty quickly. So lesson 2 is all about switching it up, adding different sounds to our commands. So it's not an official way to think about it, but for purposes of this tutorial, think about adding synth or using the use synth command as an above line command. I'll explain what that means in a second. But first, let's just see it in action. Let's say we want to just change the way all of these lines of code here, this play 38, play 50, and play 62, we want to just change how they all sound. The command is basically we go to the very beginning above what we want to change. So we pick the line above it. We write use_synth. Now we have the command in there. The next step is just to press space. And then this is the first time students will be seeing a drop-down menu like this. Now these come up again in several other commands throughout Sonic Pi. But basically, students are able to just use their down arrow on their keyboard to navigate through all the different options here for what they can change the sounds to. Some of these have very familiar sounding names like piano or pluck, obviously like piano or strings. Some of them are a little bit more ambiguous. However, there is a whole question and a section in the workbook devoted to students just spending time experimenting and exploring these on their own to find the sounds they like the best. So for now, let's just pick one. Let's pick a mod. Now, this, which had just sounded like beeps a second ago, now has a very different vibe to it. So that is how use_synth works. It applies to every play command that happens after it. So this will apply to everything. So if we wrote 100 lines of code just to play and sleep, they would all sound like this. So let's say you want some of your notes to have a certain sound, and then others you want to change that up. Well, you can do that too. You just need to pick above where the next play is that you want to change. So here, right now it's currently on line 7. So I made an extra space here. We can just write the command one more time. We can do this as many times as we want throughout our coded composition. Press space. Say we want this one to be mod dsaw. So now if we hit run, so it starts with that the sound that we picked earlier with mod FM, and it ends with mod dsaw. Now you can alternate this for every single play note that you have in a composition. However, it's most useful for differentiating parts of music that you're composing. So verses, pre-choruses, choruses. If your students are making like traditionally structured songs like that, it can be great to have a chorus with a different sound that sounds a certain way. But that is synth in a nutshell. Let's move on to amp and pan. Now I've grouped these two together in this tutorial because they're very similar and they work the same way. So unlike the use synth command, which is an above line command as I'm calling it, amp and pan are same line command. Now I'll show you what that looks like here in a sec. Again, amp, short for amplitude, basically allows us to adjust the volume of our notes. A higher value of amplitude is going to make for a louder note. Lower value, obviously, lower note. Um, pan, again, as I explained, just helps determine the channel of audio. So which side of your headphones the audio is coming out of. So let's just get right into it. Right now, we just have some very generic play and sleep commands. Pretty much the extent of the knowledge that your students will have at this point. And let's just say we want to make play 60 right here on line 3, a little bit louder. So for same line commands like amp and pan, all you have to do is put a comma and a space. Amp is the first one here in the alphabet. Now by default, everything has a amplitude or an amp command of 1. So anything higher than 1 is going to make for a louder note, and anything lower than 1 obviously will make for a lower note. So let's just say, just to accent the point here, let's do amp 4, and then just so you can hear the difference, let's do amp 0.5. Anytime you do a decimal in Sonic Pi, if it's less than 1, there needs to be a 0 in front of it. You can't just do 0.5 or you will get an error. And then just to show it even further here, we'll do amp 4 just the same way. Now, let's listen to this. So notice a stark difference in volume between the first and second notes there, simply just by using the amp command. So unlike the above line commands like use synth, this will only apply to the line that it's on. So for example, this line here, the play 60, has an amplitude of 4. If we didn't write this amplitude of 0.5 here, this play 60 would just default to amp of 1. So keep that in mind. You can't just set the overall volume of your piece this way. It only affects the line that it's on. So while we're on this, pan works the same way. So I'm just going to get rid of this. It's a good way to reinforce this here. So pan, again, change the channel of your audio. Let's say we want play 60 to come out of our left earphone all the way. Like we don't want to hear it in our right at all. We can do the exact same thing, comma, space. We'll write the word pan, put a colon and a space. Left is always going to be -1. So the range of values here goes from -1 to 1. And the way I think about it is like a number line. If students have trouble remembering it, the left side of the number line is it's always negative. So if you want it to come out of the left earphone, you do pan -1. Now, if we want it to come out of the right, alternatively, you guessed it, we do pan 1. Now you can blend this down in between -1 and 1 if you want more of a mix of a certain sound to come out of a different space. However, this is like the most stark and the most useful way to make cool effects happen is if you have, a melody and you want to create that effect of having one of the notes come out of the left, then the right, and then alternate back and forth. It can sound pretty cool. But let's just take a listen to what this is like. And it'll be hard for you to tell if you don't wear headphones for this. So that's how pan works. Again, these commands, they're far less important than some other ones. So it's just a good way to practice doing commands that are separated by commas here. You can combine amp and pan in the same line. All you have to do is separate it by a comma again, and it would look something like this. So keep that in mind as well. There's no limit to that. It can get a little unwieldy if you have too many customized commands on each line just for a single note. However, if you code it right, you shouldn't have any problems with it.